Holisss! Welcome to today's video. It's going to be a weird one, not going to be very structured or make a lot of sense, but it is mid-April and I have had a time trying to get through a physical book this month. So I just want to chat about that for a little bit and then talk about some of the books that I have been getting through, which have been audiobooks for the most part. And then I also have like 5 minutes of some clips that I took when I went to DC earlier this month for cherry blossom season, which was very cute, very fun. So I don't really have anywhere to put those clips. So I just thought I would do like a quick reading update and then just have a little DC fun clip section at the end. So yeah, just a quick random one today. Outside of reading, not much going on. This month has just been a lot of errands and going back and forth between here and Laredo, and yeah, just busy, but the weather has been nice. I've done a lot of reading, but mostly just this one book that I started almost exactly a month ago. It's Open Veins of Latin America by Eduardo Galeano, but I'm reading the Spanish version, Las Venas Abiertas de América Latina, and I am reading the Spanish version for a couple of reasons. One being that it was originally written in Spanish, and usually when there's books that I want to read that were written in Spanish, I prefer to read the original just because there's nothing wrong with translations, and I think it's great that so many Spanish books are being translated to English and to other languages just to give access to more people to read these books, especially books that, like this one, show a lot of the history and give important background information and context to people outside of Latin America on issues that are important to that region. And even for other books I haven't actually read any nonfiction books in Spanish before. This is my first one, but I have read fiction books in Spanish, and just in general with translations, when I have read English translations of Spanish books or other languages, and this is something that, I've talked about in other videos, but there's always something lost in translation. There are things that when you take a text and kind of transport it from its original language to another language, you lose some context. You lose some of the things that make that text grounded in the place where it was written. And that's just the nature of translation. So because I have the capacity to read a book in Spanish, I think that's a privilege that I would be wasting if I don't use it from time to time to read books in the way that they were originally written. Another reason that I chose to read this book in Spanish is that was the copy available in my library. There were English versions, but those had a wait list. The Spanish version was free to borrow at the time, so I was like, yeah, why not do that? So I checked it out from my library, started reading it, and then I got a few chapters in when I realized, okay, this is actually a lot harder for me to read than I anticipated that it would be. With Spanish in general, like my vocabulary is very basic, so with literature, I oftentimes have to look up the meanings of a lot of words that I've never heard before. And then, of course, it also varies with country to country, region to region, depending on where the author is from. Latin America is huge. Spanish-speaking countries are plenty, so each one has their own slang, their own specific ways of speaking Spanish. So, that's kind of a given when I'm reading in Spanish, that I'm not going to be able to understand everything as easily as I would be able to just read a book in English. But especially with a dense historical nonfiction like this one, I'm finding it to be pretty hard. And Eduardo Galeano is, as far as I know, he is a poet and he writes like very beautifully, but in a way that's just not very straightforward. He uses a lot of metaphors and kind of very expressive language. So there's a lot that I'm having to look up. I'm having to reread things a lot. So it's just taken me a long time. On top of the fact that it's just a very tough subject matter. So, I didn't even talk about what this book was about. Open Veins of Latin America was written in the 60s by Eduardo Galeano, who is a writer from Uruguay. And he's writing about basically the entire history of Latin America from a economic standpoint and how it has for its entire modern history been dominated by imperialist powers, first from colonization from the Europeans, and now from economic imperialism from Europe and the United States. So it's a very, very vast subject, and he's trying to cover like the entire history up until the 1960s of every single Latin American country. So it's just a lot of information, and a lot of it just gets very, very repetitive. I think on purpose, because there's so many instances and so many examples of exploitation and abuse and imperialism, and it's a history that has been ongoing for a long time and keeps repeating itself throughout all of the different Latin American countries. So I think it's written this way very purposefully because Eduardo Galeano is trying to make the point on how prevalent this is. But it kind of just adds to like the heaviness of the book and like why it's been such a struggle, and it feels like a challenge to read. Both like actually physically, because I'm reading it in Spanish. It was written in the 1960s. It's covering a lot of history and dense subjects, but also just because of the nature of the topic and how demoralizing it feels to read about the abuse and exploitation of these countries, and knowing that, you know, in the 50 years plus that has elapsed since this book was written, it has only gotten worse. So it's just hard to read about. I am currently about 75% of the book through. It's not a terribly long book. It's less than 400 pages, but it's just very wordy. That's kind of a dumb thing to say about a book. But it is. Like, Eduardo Galeano has very flowery writing. And yeah, like I said, I started this book almost exactly a month ago, and I don't think I'm going to finish it within the next couple of days. It's probably going to be by the end of this week. So that'll be more than a month in at that point. So yeah, it just feels a little demoralizing to be having such a hard time reading this book when I was very excited to read it, and I'm glad to be reading it. It's very important, and I'm just hoping that the challenge that it's presenting doesn't take away from like the importance of all the information that I'm gaining from this. And that's just really something that I'll have to kind of grapple with mentally by myself, just making sure that like actually sit with and try to absorb this information and reflect on it, regardless of how hard of a time I had reading this or how long it took me, because, you know, I feel a little bit like, I don't know if embarrassed is the right word. I'm just feeling a little defeated by this book, but I'm getting through it. And yeah, we'll reflect on it once it's over, try to take it all in, and I'll give you guys an update once we're through. Yeah, I just don't want it to be like once I finish it, I know that I'm going to feel like the sense of relief to be done with it. But I think my instinct will be to try to just move on to the next thing really quickly and try to like not think about how long it took me to read this book and how hard it was, blah, blah, blah. But I think this book deserves some more care and some more thinking about what I just read instead of just like quickly moving on to the next thing. So I'm going to try to do that when I finally finish this book. It's a feat, but it's an important one, and I'm trying to not let that take away from the importance of the book, if that makes any sense. So yeah, this has been my physical read all month. But as always, I've got a couple of audiobooks at the same time based on the audiobook that I was reading at the beginning of the month, and some of the ones that I had lined up. I was like, oh, maybe this is going to be like a Latina heavy reading month, or like completely, you know, Latinx authors. But that ended up not being the case. So at the beginning of the month, I was listening to a book called Medea me cantó un corrido, written by Dalia de la Cerda, a Mexican author who I have been hearing a lot about. I think her most well-known novel is called Perras de Reserva, which is in English Reservoir Bitches. And I've just had a lot of like the people that I follow on social media and on Bookstagram read and recommend that book. But that one was not available at my library. I got on the wait list, but Medea me cantó un corrido, or Medea sang me a corrido, was available. So I checked it out, and that book was incredible. The audiobook specifically, so good. It's kind of a anthology short story collection. Each story has a different narrator, and they are slightly connected, but they're kind of their own narratives. And in the audiobook, each story has a different audiobook narrator, and they're all incredible. I read it in Spanish, and it was just really, really good. It was such a quick listen, but I really loved it. And in general terms, it talks about violence in Mexico and how it affects women and young men, and especially those who are in vulnerable positions due to poverty and narco violence. Yeah, that one was really, really good. And then right after that, I read Clean by Alia Trabuco Ceran, who is a Chilean author. And that one was also a pretty quick listen. That one I did listen to in English because the Spanish one wasn't available. And that one is like a single narrative about a woman who's a housekeeper for a wealthy family in Chile. And she's telling us her story. I won't go into details because I think I want to talk about these more in my eventual reading wrap up. But that one was also very good, but it was also kind of heavy. And after those two and, trying to get through Open Veins, I was just feeling a slump. I was feeling very just sad, adding to just the state of the world right now and everything going on in real life. I was just feeling a little bit like a depression was coming on, honestly. So I needed something light and fun. And I decided to read the third book in the Lila Sage Rebel Blue Ranch, is that what it's called? In her romance novel series. I believe the third one is called Lost and Lassoed, and I've read the first two, so I'm in deep with these. I decided to read the third one, and it was just a fun time. It was, typical romance. It was a cowboy enemies to lovers kind of romance, and it was exactly what you'd expect. And I appreciated that because I was like, this is what I need right now. It delivered, and it made me feel just a little lighter. And so yeah, kind of broke my Latinx reading streak, but it's okay. It's what I needed at the time. And now my next book, the next audiobook that I picked up is actually another one written by a Latina author. It's called Magical Realism. And it's written by a woman who's from the Rio Grande Valley. So Texas, border girl. I immediately, as soon as I started listening to it, knew that I was going to love it. I was like really connected to Vanessa. It's kind of a memoir essay collection, and she's talking about borders and fantasy and pop culture and connecting all of these things in her life. And I've only read the first essay and kind of like the intro to the book, but I can already tell that it's going to be great and that I'm going to love it. And, I've had people recommend this book, so I'm not going in totally blind, but I'm just very excited to listen to this. And yeah, it's been kind of a weird month, just reading-wise. Outside of reading, it's been very lovely, but reading-wise, it's been a little tough, tougher than usual, but that's just the nature of it. I was beginning to think reading slumps aren't a thing for me because I've never experienced one truly before. And I don't know that I would say that I'm fully in one right now. I'm definitely not, because I'm still able to find joy in reading and like look forward to reading this book, Open Veins. I'm like, I want to keep going and I'm intrigued by it every time I open it up. but I do feel like it'll be interesting once I finish it to want to pick up another book, because I do, and I'm excited about the books that I have lined up. But I feel like it'll just be, I'll have to like shift my mindset and think about a good way to transition so I'm not like just moving on from this too quickly like I talked about. But yeah, just, it's a good problem to have. I'm very thankful for information and knowledge, and for my library specifically, I don't know what I would do without a library card and without access to libraries and to all the books and services and things that they provide. So support your local library. I don't have to talk about things that the current administration thinks are valuable and are trying to take from us, but y'all know what I mean. Books are being banned, libraries are being defunded, and they're trying to criminalize knowledge, but we know how important it is. I'm very thankful. I will support my local libraries as much as possible. And yeah, that is my reading update. Now, here is a little recap of my DC trip. It was a very quick weekend trip. We have some friends that moved to DC recently, and we wanted to mostly visit them. I had been to DC once before in high school with my family on a summer road trip, and we stopped by there pretty quickly. I think it was maybe a couple of days that we were there. But yeah, I had kind of done like the whole National Mall tour during that trip, but my partner, he had never been, so that was like kind of the quick monument sightseeing for him on the first day that we were there. And then on the second day, our friends took us to Georgetown, and we just had kind of a chill day with them. And it was cherry blossom season, so that was also a bonus that we got to see a lot of the cherry blossoms. But it gets packed. It's a very popular tourist season for a reason. So yeah, the second day we just tried to chill a little more. But yeah, it was very beautiful. So I thought I would just share some cherry blossom clips, and yeah, that's it, I think. Yeah, I'm just gonna wrap up with that. I just wanted to say, hey, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to my incoherent reading thoughts. I would love to hear what you've been reading this spring. Yeah, I hope you're good. Hope you're taking care of yourself. Thanks for being here. I'll see y'all next time. Bye. Bye.